Logan Bennett strode down the bustling street, his polished Italian shoes clicking rhythmically against the pavement. His sharp suit was perfectly tailored, hugging his athletic frame, exuding an air of power and confidence. His face was chiseled, cold, and emotionless, a mask he had perfected over the years. To the world, Logan Bennett was untouchable, a ruthless millionaire who never looked back. He was about to cross the street when he stopped dead in his tracks. His heart skipped a beat, an involuntary reaction that took him by surprise. On the corner, by a crumbling brick wall, a woman sat huddled on the cold, hard ground. Her clothes were ragged, tattered, and stained with dirt. Her hair was a tangled mess, and her face was pale, gaunt, etched with lines of pain and suffering. Beside her, 2 little girls, twins no older than 4, clung to her sides. Their eyes were wide and hollow, their faces smeared with dirt, and their tiny hands clasped together in fear. One of them was quietly sobbing, rubbing her eyes with fists that were far too small to carry such heavy sorrow. "Shoo. It's okay, sweetheart," the woman whispered, her voice trembling with desperate love. "Someone will help us, someday." Logan's chest tightened, a foreign, uncomfortable feeling creeping up his spine. He stared at the woman, his eyes narrowing as he tried to see through the dirt and despair that covered her face. It couldn't be. But it was. Even through the exhaustion, the sunken cheeks, and the haunted eyes, he recognized her. Olivia Carter. The girl he had loved in high school. The girl who was once the most radiant, the most popular, the most beautiful. The girl who never knew he existed. Memories flooded back, of stolen glances across the classroom, of her laughter echoing in the hallways, of the way her golden hair danced in the sunlight. But that was a lifetime ago. Now, she was unrecognizable, broken, and vulnerable. Logan's hands clenched into fists, his jaw tightening as he watched her. 1,000 questions swirled in his mind. How did she end up like this? What happened to her? Where was the confident, lively girl he once admired from afar? But before he could speak, Olivia looked up, her hollow eyes locking with his. Time stood still. For a moment, he saw a flicker of recognition, followed by shame. Her face crumbled, and she looked away, pulling her children closer as if to shield them from the past that had suddenly reappeared. Logan's heart raced. His cold, indifferent exterior began to crack, revealing emotions he thought he had buried long ago. He couldn't walk away. Not this time. Logan took a deep breath, his chest tight with emotions he didn't want to acknowledge. He took a hesitant step forward, his shadow stretching long on the cold pavement. "Olivia," he called, his voice low and uncertain. The woman's shoulders tensed. Slowly, she lifted her head, her hollow eyes locking onto his. For a moment, time stood still. Her lips parted in shock, and her body seemed to shrink as she recognized him. Logan. Her voice was barely a whisper, fragile and trembling. He took another step closer, his gaze fixed on her face, searching for traces of the girl she once was. But all he saw was suffering, etched into every line, every shadow. "What happened to you?" The question escaped his lips before he could stop himself. Olivia looked away, her hands instinctively tightening around her daughter's. Her shoulders shook, as if weighed down by shame. It doesn't matter," she stammered. "We're fine. Just go away, Logan." "Fine?" Logan looked at her tattered clothes, the gauntness of her cheeks, the exhaustion in her eyes. Then he looked at the girls. One of them was still sobbing softly, tears carving tracks through the dirt on her face. The other was silent, clutching her mother's arm, wide eyes staring up at him, afraid and curious at the same time. Logan's heart ached in a way he didn't think was possible anymore. He took another step forward, his voice firm but gentle. "You're not fine, Olivia. Look at you, look at them." She flinched, curling in on herself. "I don't need your pity. We don't need anything from you." Logan's jaw tightened. It wasn't pity he felt. It was regret. And anger at the world, at whatever had broken her so completely. But mostly, anger at himself for not being there when she needed help. He looked down at the girls again. Their frail bodies, dirty faces, and tiny hands clutching at their mother for safety. He couldn't just walk away. Not this time. "Come with me," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "I'll help you. I'll help them." Olivia shook her head fiercely. "No. We're fine. We'll manage." A gust of cold wind blew down the street, making her shiver. She pulled her daughters closer, their tiny bodies huddling against her for warmth. Logan's hands clenched into fists. "You're not managing, Olivia. You're surviving. And barely at that." His eyes softened, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Please, let me help you. You don't have to do this alone. Not anymore." For a moment, Olivia's resolve wavered. Her lips trembled, and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. But she quickly blinked them away, her jaw tightening. I can't just go with you." Logan took another step closer, his presence warm and protective. "Why not? Do you not trust me?" She looked up, her eyes searching his face. The face of the boy who once loved her from afar. The boy who was always too shy to speak to her, who watched her laugh with friends, who never had the courage to tell her how he felt. But that boy was gone. In his place was a man, strong, confident, determined. And his eyes were filled with something she hadn't seen in a long time. Kindness. Her shoulders sagged, and her defenses began to crumble. But fear still held her back. I don't want to be a burden." Logan's expression softened, a sad smile playing on his lips. "You could never be a burden, Olivia. Not to me." He reached out his hand, his palm open and steady. "Let me help you. Let me help them." The little girls looked up at their mother, their eyes wide and pleading. Their tiny faces were pale from hunger and cold. One of them tugged on Olivia's sleeve. "Mommy, I'm cold." Olivia's heart shattered. She looked down at her daughters, then back at Logan. Her eyes filled with shame and desperation. She knew she couldn't protect them here, on the street, in the cold. But how could she trust Logan? How could she accept help from the boy who once loved her, the man she never gave a second thought to? But then she looked at his eyes again, filled with sincerity, with a warmth that thawed the ice around her heart. He wasn't here to judge her. He was here to save her. Her lips quivered as she fought back tears. With a shaky breath, she took his hand. Logan's fingers closed around hers, firm and reassuring. His face softened, relief washing over his features. "Come on, let's get you out of here." He pulled out his phone and called his driver. His voice was commanding, leaving no room for questions. "Be here in 5 minutes. Now." He turned back to Olivia, his hand never letting go of hers. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. I promise." Olivia looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with uncertainty and hope. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe. Maybe, just maybe, they could be saved. The car ride was suffocatingly silent. Logan sat stiffly, his hands clasped together, eyes occasionally flicking to Olivia, who sat opposite him, her body hunched protectively around her daughters. The little girls were exhausted, their small heads resting on their mother's shoulders, their breaths shallow and uneven. Olivia stared out the window, her eyes distant, lost in a world of pain and memories. Logan watched her reflection in the glass, his chest tightening as he saw the hollow look in her eyes. How had it come to this? He remembered her differently. Lively, radiant, always surrounded by friends. She was the girl who never had to try to be noticed, while he was the boy who was always invisible. And yet, he had loved her. From a distance, silently, hopelessly. The car pulled up to his mansion, a grand, imposing structure with tall gates and sprawling gardens. Olivia's eyes widened as she looked at the magnificent building, her body tensing in discomfort. Logan noticed her hesitation. He turned to her, his voice soft. "You don't have to be afraid. You're safe here." Olivia's lips tightened, and she looked away. Safe. She didn't know the meaning of that word anymore. The housekeeper opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise at the sight of Olivia and the children. But she said nothing, merely bowing respectfully as Logan guided them inside. "Prepare a room for them, and have food brought to the living room." Logan's voice was firm, leaving no room for questions. The housekeeper nodded, moving swiftly to carry out his orders. Olivia stood awkwardly in the grand hall, feeling completely out of place. The marble floors gleamed, the chandeliers sparkled, and the air smelled of fresh flowers and wealth. She felt like an intruder. Logan noticed her discomfort and gently touched her arm. "Come. Let's get you something to eat." He led her and the girls to the living room, a warm, cozy space with plush sofas and a fireplace crackling softly. The twins' eyes lit up at the sight of the fire, their tiny bodies instinctively gravitating toward its warmth. Logan watched them, his heart twisting at how easily they were pleased by something so simple. How long had they been cold? How long had they been hungry? A maid brought in a tray laden with sandwiches, fruits, and hot chocolate. The girls' eyes widened, and they looked up at their mother, hesitant. Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away, nodding to her daughters. "Go on, it's okay." The twins moved cautiously at first, then with growing excitement as they tasted the food. Logan watched, his heart aching as he realized just how hungry they must have been. He turned to Olivia, his voice gentle. "When was the last time they had a proper meal?" Olivia flinched, shame coloring her cheeks. She looked down, her fingers trembling as she clasped them tightly together. It's been a while." Logan felt anger rise within him, anger at a world that could allow this to happen. And guilt, because he had never even thought of her all these years. He sat down opposite her, his eyes fixed on her face. "I need to understand, Olivia." His voice was firm but soft, pleading. "What happened to you? How did you end up like this?" Olivia's shoulders tensed, and she looked away, her body curling inward. I don't want to talk about it." "You don't have to be ashamed. I'm not here to judge you. I just want to help." Logan's voice was sincere, his eyes softening with empathy. Olivia's defenses began to crack. Her lips trembled, and her eyes grew glassy with unshed tears. "I don't even know where to start." Logan waited, his silence gentle, encouraging. Olivia took a shaky breath, her fingers twisting nervously. "After high school, I started dating Jake Miller. You remember him, don't you? The most popular guy in school." Logan's jaw tightened at the mention of Jake. He remembered him all too well. A charming golden boy who got everything he wanted, who always looked down on people like Logan. Olivia's voice was distant, haunted. I thought he loved me. He said he did. He promised me everything. And I believed him. She swallowed hard, her eyes staring at a point far away. A few months later, I found out I was pregnant. I thought we would face it together. But he didn't want to. Logan's fists tightened, his knuckles turning white. He left you? Olivia's lips quivered, and she nodded. He said he wasn't ready to be a father. That he had his whole future ahead of him, and he didn't want us to ruin it. Her voice broke, and a tear slipped down her cheek. He walked away. Just like that. I never saw him again. Logan's chest tightened with fury. That coward, that selfish, heartless coward. I tried to manage. I really did. But no one wanted to hire a pregnant woman. And after the girls were born, everything just fell apart. She looked at her daughters, her eyes filled with guilt and pain. I did everything I could, but it was never enough. I lost my job, and then our home. We ended up on the streets. Her shoulders shook, and she covered her face with her hands. I failed them. I failed my babies. Logan moved instinctively, his body reacting before his mind could catch up. He crossed the room and knelt before her, his hands resting gently on her trembling shoulders. No, Olivia. You didn't fail them. You fought. You survived. And that's more than enough. Olivia looked up, her tear-filled eyes meeting his. For a moment, she saw the boy she once knew, the one who was always so kind, so gentle. Her walls came crashing down, and she sobbed, her body collapsing against his. Logan held her, his arms strong and steady. His heart ached as he felt her pain, her fear, her exhaustion. He closed his eyes, his jaw tightening with resolve. He wouldn't let her suffer anymore. He wouldn't let her fight alone. You're not alone anymore, Olivia, he whispered, his voice breaking. I promise. I'll help you. I'll help them. And for the first time in years, Olivia allowed herself to hope. The morning sun streamed through the mansion's tall windows, casting a golden glow over the grand dining room. Logan watched as the twins, Harper and Hazel, hesitantly climbed into the oversized chairs, their tiny feet dangling above the floor. Their eyes widened at the spread before them, bowls of colorful fruits, fluffy pancakes dripping with syrup, freshly baked bread, and steaming cups of hot chocolate. For a moment, they just stared, their faces a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Logan's heart ached as he realized they didn't know if it was meant for them. Go on, he said gently, his voice softening. Eat as much as you want. It's all for you. The girls looked up at their mother, seeking permission. Olivia's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her lips trembling as she nodded. Yes, it's okay. That was all they needed. Harper grabbed a slice of bread, her small hands trembling as she took a tentative bite. Hazel reached for the pancakes, her eyes lighting up as the sweet syrup touched her tongue. Logan couldn't look away. Their joy was pure, innocent, and heartbreaking. No child should be this amazed by something as simple as breakfast. Olivia watched them too, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. Logan noticed how she sat stiffly, not touching the food in front of her. You should eat too, he urged softly. You need your strength. Her body tensed, and she shook her head. I'm fine. I'm not hungry. Logan's gaze softened. He knew that look, pride, mixed with shame. She was trying to make sure her children had enough, even if it meant going without. "You're safe here, Olivia," he whispered, his voice almost pleading. "You don't have to starve yourself anymore." Her lips quivered, and she looked away, her shoulders slumping. Slowly, she picked up a piece of fruit, her movements hesitant and uncertain. As she took a bite, her eyes closed, and Logan saw the emotions ripple across her face: relief, gratitude, and pain. They ate in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. Logan watched the girls laugh and smile for the first time, their faces lighting up as they tasted food they had only dreamed of. His heart swelled, but his chest tightened as he realized how much they had suffered. After breakfast, the housekeeper showed the girls to the garden, where they ran freely, their laughter echoing through the mansion's walls. Logan and Olivia stayed behind, the heavy silence returning. He turned to her, his eyes searching her face. "You don't have to feel ashamed, Olivia. None of this is your fault." Her body went rigid, her hands clasping tightly together. "But it is." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I chose him. I believed him. I thought we would be a family. But he abandoned us." Logan's jaw tightened. The anger he felt toward Jake Miller was a flame that wouldn't die. He wanted to find him, to make him pay for what he had done. But right now, Olivia needed something else: understanding, compassion. "You did what anyone would do, Olivia. You trusted someone you loved. That's not a crime." His voice was firm but gentle, his eyes never leaving hers. "The only one to blame is him. Not you." Her shoulders sagged, and her defenses began to crack. Tears filled her eyes, and her voice wavered. I've tried to be strong for them. But I'm so tired, Logan. I'm so tired of fighting." Her body shook with silent sobs, and Logan's heart shattered. He stepped closer, his presence steady and warm. "You don't have to fight alone anymore. Not anymore." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. There was no judgment in his gaze, only compassion and sincerity. The walls she had built to protect herself began to crumble, and she let out a shuddering breath. Why are you doing this?" Her voice was filled with confusion and disbelief. "Why do you care?" Logan's chest tightened, and his hands curled into fists at his sides. How could he explain it to her? That he had loved her for years, even when she didn't know he existed. That seeing her like this tore him apart in ways he didn't think were possible. He took a deep breath, his voice low and raw. "Because you were the one good thing in my life, Olivia. Even if you never knew it. You were the light I chased, even when I was lost in the dark." Olivia's eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. She looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. The boy she once dismissed, now standing before her as a man, strong, kind, and protective. Her walls shattered completely, and the tears fell freely. She covered her face with her hands, her body trembling. Logan moved instinctively, wrapping his arms around her, holding her as she broke down. He held her tightly, his chin resting on her head, his own eyes burning. He felt her pain, her fear, her exhaustion. He felt the weight she had been carrying alone for so long. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'll help you. I'll help them. I swear it." They stayed like that for a while, tangled in each other's pain and hope. Outside, the twins' laughter echoed, a sound so pure and innocent it brought tears to Logan's eyes. He made a promise to himself then and there. He would protect them. He would fight for them. He would give them back the childhood they deserved. And maybe, just maybe, he could heal the woman who once stole his heart. A knock at the door broke the moment, and the housekeeper entered, her eyes warm and gentle. "Mr. Bennett, the car is ready." Logan looked at Olivia, his eyes firm with determination. "We're going shopping today. You and the girls need clothes, shoes, everything." Olivia's eyes widened, and she shook her head. "No. I can't, it's too much." Logan's expression softened, but his voice was unwavering. "You deserve this, Olivia. They deserve this. Please, let me do this for you." Her lips trembled, and her eyes filled with gratitude. She nodded, her voice choked. "Thank you." Logan smiled softly, his eyes glistening. "Let's go give them a reason to smile." Together, they walked out of the room, side by side, stepping into a new beginning. And for the first time in years, Olivia felt hope bloom in her heart. The shopping mall was bright and bustling, filled with laughter and the hum of cheerful voices. Logan walked beside Olivia, his eyes never straying far from her and the twins. Harper and Hazel were skipping excitedly, their faces glowing with joy as they held hands and pointed at the colorful displays. Olivia watched them, her heart swelling with gratitude and relief. For the first time in years, her daughters were smiling, truly smiling. She glanced at Logan, his face softening as he watched the girls. Her chest tightened. How could she ever repay him for this kindness? They walked into a children's clothing store, and Harper's eyes sparkled as she ran to a rack of frilly dresses. "Mommy! Look," she squealed, holding up a pink dress with lace and ribbons. Hazel's eyes widened with excitement, her little fingers brushing the soft fabric. Olivia's eyes filled with tears, her heart aching. She couldn't remember the last time she saw them this happy. Logan noticed her hesitation and leaned closer. "Let them choose whatever they like. Money's not a problem." Olivia's lips trembled, and she looked down, her hands twisting nervously. I can't let you do this. It's too much." Logan's eyes softened, his voice gentle. "It's not too much. They deserve this, Olivia. You deserve this." Her resolve crumbled, and she nodded, wiping away a tear. "Thank you." The girls ran from rack to rack, their laughter filling the store. They tried on dresses, hats, and shoes, twirling in front of the mirrors with giddy excitement. Logan couldn't stop smiling. He'd never felt so much joy just by watching someone else's happiness. As they left the store with bags full of clothes, shoes, and toys, Logan noticed a figure standing across the hallway. His body went rigid, and his jaw clenched. It was Jake Miller. He looked just as Logan remembered him, arrogant, charming, and selfish. But his eyes were different now, cold, calculating. And they were fixed on Olivia. Logan stepped protectively closer to her, his eyes narrowing. Olivia followed his gaze, her body tensing as she saw Jake. Her face went pale, and she instinctively pulled her daughters closer. Jake's lips curled into a smug smile as he walked over, his eyes flicking to Logan with a look of disdain. Well, look who it is. Olivia Carter. I never thought I'd see you again." Olivia's shoulders stiffened, her voice shaking. "What do you want, Jake?" Jake's eyes moved to the twins, his smile widening. "So, those are my kids, huh?" Logan's fists clenched, his body moving instinctively between Jake and the girls. "Stay away from them. You lost that right a long time ago." Jake's eyes flashed with anger, his jaw tightening. "And who the hell are you to tell me what to do?" Logan's voice was cold, deadly calm. "I'm the one who's been taking care of them. The one who's doing your job." Jake laughed, the sound hollow and mocking. "So that's how it is, huh? You think you can just waltz in and play hero? Well, sorry to burst your bubble, but they're mine. I have every right to see them." Olivia's body shook with anger, her eyes flashing. "You walked away, Jake. You left us with nothing. You don't get to come back now and pretend to care." Jake's eyes narrowed, his voice cold. "I made a mistake, all right? But they're still my blood. And I'm not leaving without them." Hazel and Harper clung to Olivia, their eyes wide with fear. Logan's heart broke as he saw their terrified faces. He wouldn't let this monster take them away. He stepped forward, his body shielding them from Jake. "You abandoned them. You don't deserve to be their father." Jake's face twisted with rage, his fists clenching. "You think you can just buy them with your money? You think you're better than me?" Logan's eyes were cold, his voice steady. "No, I don't think I'm better. I know I am. Because I care about them. Because I won't leave them like you did." Jake's jaw tightened, his eyes burning with fury. "This isn't over, Bennett. They're my kids, and I'll be damned if I let you take them from me." With that, Jake turned and stormed off, his figure disappearing into the crowd. Olivia's body sagged with relief, her legs trembling. Logan caught her before she fell, his arms strong and steady. "Are you all right?" She looked up at him, her eyes filled with fear and gratitude. He can't take them, can he?" Logan's jaw clenched, his arms tightening around her. "No. I won't let him. I'll fight him with everything I have." Olivia's lips trembled, her body leaning into his warmth. "Why are you doing this for me? Why do you care so much?" Logan's eyes softened, his voice low and raw. "Because I've loved you since we were kids, Olivia. And I never stopped." Her breath caught, her eyes widening. "Logan." He looked away, his face flushing. "I know it's crazy. You never even noticed me back then. But I watched you, every day. You were the light in my life. The reason I kept going." Tears filled her eyes, her heart breaking and healing all at once. She reached up, her fingers brushing his cheek. "I see you now, Logan. I see everything you are. And I'm so grateful." Logan's chest tightened, his heart pounding. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. "I promise. I'll protect you. I'll protect them. You're not alone anymore." Olivia's tears fell, her arms wrapping around him. Thank you for finding me." He held her close, his heart bursting with love and determination. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the bustling crowd. But in that moment, they were the only two people in the world. And Logan knew, no matter what it took, he would fight to keep this family safe. Together, they walked out of the mall, their hearts beating as one. They were no longer broken. They were whole. And nothing would ever take that away. Back at Logan's mansion, the golden sunset bathed the room in a warm, amber glow. Olivia stood by the window, her arms wrapped protectively around herself as she watched Harper and Hazel play in the garden. Their laughter floated through the air, pure and innocent, untouched by the shadows of the past. She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. It felt like a dream, too beautiful, too perfect to be real. But it was real. And it was because of him. She turned around, her heart racing as she saw Logan standing in the doorway, his face soft, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle. Olivia's lips quivered, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you for everything." Logan took a step closer, his hands sliding into his pockets, his shoulders tense. "You don't need to thank me. I just wanted to see you smile again." Olivia's heart skipped a beat, her breath catching in her throat. She took a shaky step toward him, her voice breaking. "You gave me back my life, Logan. You gave them a future. How can I ever repay that?" Logan's eyes softened, his face vulnerable. "Stay. Don't leave." His voice was raw, filled with hope and fear. "I want to be there for you, for them. I want us to be a family." Her heart raced, her chest tightening as she looked into his eyes. For so long, she had been alone, fighting, struggling, surviving. But here was a man who had fought for her, who had saved her, who loved her. Her walls crumbled, and she let out a trembling breath. "I was so lost, Logan, so broken. I didn't think anyone could save me. But you did. You found me." Logan's face softened, his eyes glistening. "I was lost too, Olivia. But loving you, it saved me." She took another step closer, her hand reaching out, her fingers brushing his. His warmth spread through her, melting away the coldness that had gripped her heart for so long. "I don't want to be alone anymore," she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. "I want to be with you. I want us to be a family." Logan's face broke into a smile, his eyes shining. He closed the distance between them, his arms wrapping around her, holding her close. "You'll never be alone again. I promise." They stood there, their hearts beating as one, wrapped in each other's arms. Outside, Harper and Hazel's laughter echoed, a beautiful melody of hope and joy. The darkness was gone. The pain was healed. They were no longer broken. They were whole. Together. As the screen fades to black, the narrator's voice gently breaks the silence. Sometimes, life breaks us in ways we never expect. But love has the power to heal, to save, to make us whole again. Would you have done the same if you were in Logan's place? Would you forgive and love someone who once walked away? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories. Because sometimes, the most broken people create the most beautiful families.